The scroll gives you an opportunity to look beyond the lips of the prophet into the heart and the fears and the feet of the prophet. And I think it's very, very important that we do that, because when we understand who a person is, then we can balance what they say against where they came from, how they feel, and who they really are. Sometimes our greatest messages are never in our lips. It's in our struggle, it's in our pain, it's in our problems. Our human fallacies is what connects us to people. And I think the opportunity to let people know that you're just a guy like anybody else, a person with issues and kids and crises and stresses just like them. It is our similarity to them that makes us relative to them. I don't want to be their hero. I want to be one from among them, because that's who I am.
I'm from a little town called East St. Louis, Illinois, as opposed to St. Louis, Missouri, and trust me, there is a difference. East St. Louis is a place kind of like Nazareth, about which they asked, can any good thing come out of East St. Louis? Can any good thing come out of Nazareth? I came from a place that was racist, as many places were then. I was the only black student in a music school. It's called Shields School of Music. Only black student, only black piano student there. And one Saturday, the owner of the school took all of the students on this amusement ship called the Admiral. Admiral would sail up and down the Mississippi River, docked in St. Louis, still there today. And they were going to take all of the students and on a Saturday for this outing, this field trip. And I'm the only black there. My mother brought me this little suit, and I was dressed up to go to the, and it would just kind of sail up and down the river, but you know, it had dancing and it had games and stuff for kids and everything. And my dad was on my left side and my mother was on my right side, and you had to go down this embankment, you know, down to the dock. And I'll never forget it. I was about, maybe I was 10, 12, maybe 10, I don't know, I was a young kid. And walking down this ramp, at the bottom, I saw these two huge white men. One was dressed in all white, who I learned later was the captain. The other one had on like this Smokey the Bear hat. I guess he was a cop. And they had their arms folded like this. And we got to the bottom of the ramp, about to go on the boat, and this big guy, captain, said, "Where are y'all going?" And my mother said, "We're going on the Admiral, we're with the Shields School of Music." And the man said, "Not today, you ain't." And I said, "You didn't understand, we're with the Shields School of Music and all the students are going on the boat." And the man said, "We don't allow niggers on this boat." My mother said, "You don't understand, the Shields School of Music has all the music students, and my son is a student, and we're going." He said, "We don't allow niggers on this boat." And my daddy tried to explain, and the man took his finger, put his finger in my daddy's face, and he said, "If you niggers don't leave here, we're gonna lock you up. Now get on away from here." I was maybe 10, 11, 12, I don't know. I'm 62 years old today, and I will never forget the look in my daddy's face as I looked up when that white man put his finger in my daddy's face and said, "We don't let niggas on this boat." The humiliation, the embarrassment that my daddy had, that man would talk to him like that with his son there. I'm 62 years old. I've never forgotten that. I guess I'm a recovering racist. I was scarred by that for years. And it was nothing but the power of God that healed me. Well, no, that's still healing me. And years later, I stood backstage at the Oakland Coliseum. 80,000 men at a Promise Keepers at the Oakland Coliseum in Oakland, California, with 80,000 men. And 95% of those men, maybe more than that, were white. And as I stood backstage and they were about to introduce me, my knees, never happened to me before, my knees got weak. I literally sank down to my knees on the grass and tears just came out of my eyes. Because it dawned on me, this is a long way from East St. Louis. Nothing but the power of God.
The one thing that just significantly changed my life and was a time when I got full of myself. I'm now Bishop Eddie Long. I have 30,000 members. I'm broadcast in 172 nations. I can go abroad and everybody knows me, go into countries and continents, and people roll out the red carpet, etc. And you can actually get impressed with yourself to the point that you foolishly walk in a fleshly intoxication with a spiritual spin to it. And I just kind of had to wake up one day, and I don't know if kind of God was shaking me because what if all of this that people are giving you accolades for has nothing to do with what you were called to do and why you're here? It was such a shaking in me that I started taking risks again. I became, I believe, who God intended me to become with all of that shaking and all of that going on inside of me. I started to look to see, what was your real calling when God called you? And then what was it that man put on you? And I had to really go back to where I first heard God. And so when I got that, I was shaken because you know what? In the intoxication of what people say, and then your flesh can grab that says you're all this, really may not impress God, and you might not be that. And so I came to the conclusion of this saying, and somebody gave me, I can't even remember, and it says, I'm not afraid of trying and failing. I am afraid at succeeding at doing the wrong thing. What if at the all said and done, and you got plaques on the wall and newspaper articles and accolades and all of these things, and you've got the picture with your bagayo on as a bishop and been to the White House and all of those kind of things, and you know what? At the end of the day, you succeeded at doing the wrong thing. It gave me permission now to try stuff that might not work. I think one of the things that people get hung up on is a story about Jonathan, his armor bearer, when Jonathan decided to go to war because everybody else was stalled. He turned to his armor bearer and he said, come go with me, and maybe God will give victory to a few as he would many. Whatever happened to the real leaders who would operate on a maybe? Instead of the security of listening to others telling them, you bad, you this, you that. I went back to becoming a man that operated on an unction. And if it would cost me something, it would cost me my reputation, but I had conviction about it. you know, I just had to break the mold and look at, there's a lot of stuff I'm doing that's just not working. It's not working for the youth, it's not working for the teenagers, it's not working for the children or the mamas. I'd rather try and fail than succeed at doing the wrong thing.
A few years ago, I had daughter daddy day. I have all girls, and I took my girls to the museum for the day, and in the bottom of the museum in the basement they have a refreshment luncheon center. So I'm feeding my girls. My girls are divas in training. They always are concerned about make sure their hair is right, their barrettes are in place, their dresses look a certain way, and this is all by 5 years of age. And while we were downstairs eating, my middle daughter Grace dropped punch on her dress, and it was almost catastrophic. The world had stopped. That we had to go home immediately because she had a stain on her dress. And I said to Grace, we can't go home yet. We still got to see a whole nother exhibit, and your sisters aren't ready to leave. She kept crying, Daddy, please don't let me walk around with this. I said, we got to walk around with it because we're not finished the journey. We're not finished the exhibit. We haven't seen everything that we're supposed to see. But I promise you, as soon as it's over, I'm going to take you home and so we can change. She walked around disgruntled. Her sisters kept looking at her, pointing at the stain. She was almost Hester Prynne from the Scarlet Letter. She was mad with me, didn't even want to hold my hand, didn't want to speak to me because I'm making her walk around with this stain. When we finally got home, she runs through the door, tells her mother, Daddy made me walk around with this stain. Her mother said to her, well, Daddy's gonna change you. I go in the back, I change her. And in that moment, God spoke to me. After it is that I saw my name all over the blogosphere, name and issue about my divorce and infidelity was in every beauty salon, every barbershop, talked about in every church, mosque, synagogue, about how it is that I had a moral failure. And I kept saying to myself, God, why in the world would you let me deal with this kind of embarrassment? Where folks see what it is that I've done. I got to walk out in front of my congregation. I got to explain to my people how it is I had to picture perfect family, wonderful wife, how it is that I could portray my wife, my marriage, my ministry. And the Lord said, I had to let you walk around with the stain. Because if in fact you didn't go through a season where you realized you messed up, you would keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I'm going to keep making you walk around with it until I've changed you. And when I've changed you, you'll be able to come out as a different person. And you won't even remember what it was like. But you'll know that in that moment that people are looking at you. But they're not looking at you when things are going well. They're only looking at you when you have a stain. But if you can keep walking when you have the stain on and still hold my hand and still talk to me and still believe that when the process is over, when the journey is over, I'm going to change you, then you will in fact have humbled yourself and understand that it's not about you, but you're changing in my time.
How do you get over the death of a mother and sister in a short period of time? Mother died in January of '06 and sister dropped dead in May of '07. It was the hardest period of my life. In fact, it shook my very faith. And I'm just now rebounding because it took me on a whirlwind of why didn't you do something else, God? You know, I had this faith in my mother's case that she was going to be healed and have a testimony that was just gonna dumbfound the world. And I remember saying out of my mouth that basically that this is not something to the extent that it's not a permanent situation, but it's not a permanent, I can't remember, it has something to do with permanency versus temporary. And I really felt that my mother was gonna come through this thing. And I remember when the night I was with her and she passed, and I felt like, okay, God, where are you, and why even have that faith? You know, you disappointed me. You let me down, because I publicly professed these things. So it was like, my credibility is gone. That's the way I felt. I felt ashamed sometimes to stand up and talk about faith and belief and holding on and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, I felt ashamed to do it. I felt hypocritical because I know deep inside of me, I felt disappointed. I felt let down. And then when my sister dropped, oh man, I got angry at God. And at that point, I didn't feel comfortable standing in a pulpit. And I couldn't explain that to people. Because I'm the kind of person that when I stand, I want to be congruent with the word that I'm preaching. If I'm out of sorts, I can't be that vessel that God needs me to be to reach the people, because I'm going to be the hindrance, you know. And a lot of times I don't know if we think about that, because the pressure is always to be on as a minister, you know, to always have it together. You know, you don't have bad days. You don't have days where you just can't deliver for the people. You know, you got to be there. You got to be ready to give it. Push it, push it, push it, push it, push it. And I just couldn't do it. I could not stand up in front of people, and I was angry with God.
I learned to try and learn from your turbulent time. I went through a lot of turbulence during the Tawana Brawley case. I stood up for a young lady that the grand jury didn't believe. I stood with her lawyers who were disbarred. I ended up being prosecuted. And I guess when you have a 3- and 2-year-old daughter and you don't know if you're going to jail for 10 years or more, that's some very turbulent time. James Brown was like a father to me. I went through him going to jail, and I would go down and see him. That was very hard for me. The stabbing was hard for me. And just surviving, building an organization to raising millions of dollars a year eventually. What I've learned is to be honest with yourself. A lot of the things you go through, you helped bring some of the elements on yourself. So I had to learn how to separate what I caused, what I could have done better, more deliberate, from what was just unfairly imposed on me. So you got to learn how to have a press conference, but then sit down and have a self-conference and say, you know, you could have been more careful here. Even though you're right, you could have done it better. You could have been more cautious. You could have been more deliberate. You could have thought more. You also got to learn how to separate your vanity from your sanity. You've got to learn to deal with your own ego. All leaders, and I would say public servants, ministers, have ego. Ego comes with making you get up in front of an audience. The question is, do you become egotistical to the point where that is what you're feeding, or whether it's driving your mission? So I think what I've learned from turbulence is to analyze what you went through and why. The other thing I've learned is don't panic. I remember hearing a story of a preacher told me this story in the middle of a storm I was going through. He said he was on a flight from New York to California, and almost before the plane got over New Jersey, it hit turbulence. It was real bad, and the plane was dropping and shaking, and you could see lightning outside the window. It was just a terrible storm, and people were gripping their seats and holding on, and this one man was just beside himself, and he ended up even yelling out, and to the point where he got sick. He was so scared. He became so engulfed with fear till he got sick. They didn't know if he had a heart attack or whatever. He was holding his chest, fell out, and they went on, and finally the plane leveled off, and the sun came out, and everything was clear, and they was holding this guy, and the plane landed, and the plane was fine, and the guy was sick. And the motto the preacher told me is sometimes you can get sicker in the turbulence than the plane you're on. What you gotta have enough faith to do is strap down and just ride through it. The plane landed fine, and the guy was in more trouble than the plane as he's reacting to the turbulence, rather than being the instrument that was going through the turbulence, which was the plane. So I've learned to not hurt myself in the midst of the storm, because if you're riding with faith, you just strap yourself down and say, we'll get through this storm. It's gonna be a little uncomfortable for a minute, but we'll get through and we'll land, because I'm not in charge of the flight.
I think that very, very gifted people are also very, very conflicted. I mean, people see what you do, but they don't see who you are. And those are two different things. I think that we often equate what a person does with who they are, but those are two totally different things. And often they are oxymorons. And his strength is made perfect in weakness. He says he sends us out as sheep amongst wolves. The conflicts, the contradictions of it being the best and worst of times. I can remember being a young man preaching about the ableness of God, and my lights were off and my water was off, and I was married with 2 children. And they had repossessed my car, and I had to catch the bus and didn't know how much the fare was because I had done fairly well before. And caught the bus, and I took a ride uptown to see if I could talk them into keeping the power on. And I was not very successful. And in fact, the lady talked to me in the condescending way that people do when they have a little power over other people. She belittled me, berated me, and told me, my time was wasted. And I was so humiliated, and I walked out of the power company, and tears started running down my face while I was walking. And I was just, once it started, it just ripped. It just like, people probably thought I was crazy. I'm walking down the street crying like at a funeral. And after several blocks of total frustration, I could hear the Lord speak in my spirit, probably one of the sweetest words I ever heard in my life. It says, I will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He knew I was a young man, young married man, young father, scared to death that I had these visions of being homeless and sleeping in boxes, and I was afraid. I'd lost my job working for a Union Carbide. They had shut down the plant, and my little church was, just 2 or 3 people, and there's nothing there. And he said, I will not suffer thy foot to be moved. And I'd like to say that he fixed it, immediately, but he didn't. But he didn't let me fall either. So I learned how to live suspended, neither successful nor destroyed, but suspended on the edge of a cliff, sustained by nothing but a promise. But sometimes a promise is all you need to hold on to. And over time, the promise produced. But I learned how to hear God's voice when you're hysterical and when you're hurting, and that he is faithful even when you are fearful.
Believe it or not, sometimes I wonder if there's a God. And coming from me, I guess that might be quite revolting or shocking to some people. The thing that has helped me to understand there is a God in circumstances where I wanted something and believed for something and it didn't happen. I looked at massacres, and I looked at lives that were close to me that died in very ignoble and very in dignified ways, and I've seen pain and heartache sometimes when I make mistakes that I didn't want to make in my early life, and sometimes when I laid on that rock and felt so all alone. I wondered, is there a God? Is God really conscious, and is he concerned, or is he a God who put everything in motion and walked away? But the same thoughts and the same questioning has caused me to find answers that have embellished my capacity to understand that there is a God, because I can now articulate answers to the problems that caused me to think there was not a God. You see, and one of the things that has blessed me as it relates to understanding there's a God is grasping the fact that there is human responsibility in operating a world that God has given us enough intellectuality, cognitive ability to handle. And because we have failed in our ethics of responsibility and we have brought calamity, now we stand back and say there is no God, because we didn't operate in our free will properly. We want free will, but we don't want the consequences of it. And in everything that I've had a question about the existence of God, that simple truth has helped me to understand, and that is, when you do certain things, there are certain things that are going to follow, and if you don't walk in the principles of God, then what will follow you cannot be reward. It's got to be consequence, and consequence can be generational. Consequence can go on for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, because unless you right the wrong and get back in the principle, you can't expect to harvest reward. You're going to harvest consequence. And that truth showed me that with all of the mystical, ontological, and ethereal presentations that we make, man still has his responsibility to walk in the principles of God. Because when you walk in the principles of God, you walk with God. And whatever follows, God is going to follow you. And if you don't walk like that, the only time my enemies can get me, and many times I argue with God because my enemies caught me in a vulnerable, susceptible position, but the only time my enemies can get me is when I'm not walking in the principles that God has established for me to walk in. And if that brings me consequences by not walking in it, I should never question the existence of God. And I'll say one other thing about that. It's one thing, it's one level of depravity to say that I don't love God, but it is a depravity to the 100th algorithm or logarithm to say that God doesn't love me.
I was told by members of our congregation who are in the media, who work for the media, that Murdoch sat down with the campaign people and said, we're going to leave Michelle alone, we're coming after Jeremiah Wright. That was the agreement made by the campaign and by the Murdoch people. Murdoch owns the New York Post, or Murdoch owns everything almost there is, or influences it when it comes to mainstream media. So that I became the weapon to destroy the masses' confidence in this man is getting ready to be elected president. And with me becoming their weapon, first ABC, CNN, Fox News spent $4,000 buying 20 years worth of tapes to see what Barack had been listening to for 20 years. And the two sermons that they used as sound bites, one was from 5 years before the election, the other was from 8 years before the election, taken completely out of context to try to destroy the masses' confidence in that African-American person who's about to be elected president. With them trying to use me as the weapon, there were several ways in which I dealt with that and several ways in which I was able to handle that, one of which I'll share with you in terms of what I told my granddaughter, who is a junior at Howard. One was the scripture that says, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Now, they're going to form all kinds of weapons, but it's not going to work. It can't work. So with that confidence that if God be for us, who can be against us? If this is what God wants, then the rest of it is meaningless. It's just meaningless. My sense of humor that I got from my mother, primarily, my parents, I would say both, but my mother was my rock when it came to my sense of humor, and keeping a sense of humor at all times, and even in the midst of bad times, was the other way in which I was able to not let what they were trying to do crush me or destroy me. I told my granddaughter, I said, baby, I will never get to meet your grandchildren, never. But I want you to write this down so you can tell your grandchildren this about your grandfather, because what they're going to read is what the press has said. Some kid's going to do a dissertation on it, and a couple of books going to be written based on what the media has said about your grandfather. So you write this down so you can tell your grandchildren. Tell them I'm the only human being, not black, not the only black African-American male, not the only minister. I'm the only human being in the history of Northwestern University that had his honorary degree taken away from him before he could get it. That Northwestern rescinded my honorary doctorate in sacred theology because they were too embarrassed by me to give me that degree. I said, tell them that makes me unique. Nobody else has that distinction. Nobody. Number two, tell them I am the $7 million man. Now, you didn't see this because you were not born, but when I was your age, we had a TV series called The $6 Million Man. Tell them your granddaddy was a $7 million man. The Republicans and those 529 PACs spent $7 million the weekend before the election running that one ad of me preaching from the sermon, Confusing God and Government, trying to keep Barack out of the White House. $7 million, that's how much your granddaddy's worth. I said, but then I want you to tell them how powerful I am. She said, what do you mean? I said, I'm the most powerful man you'll ever meet, baby. She said, what are you talking about, granddaddy? I said, back during the campaign, and this is my mother's sense of humor, I said, Barack said he would talk without restriction to the president of Hamas and Hezbollah. Palin and them went crazy on the talking points and the debates on that. He said he would talk without restriction to the head of Iran, Ahmadinejad. He said he would talk without restriction to the president of North Korea. But he won't talk to me. I'm more powerful than the president of North Korea, the head of Hamas and Hezbollah, and the head of Iran. I'm more powerful than all them dudes, baby. She was falling out laughing. So that's how powerful your granddaddy is. Your granddaddy is such a threat to the J Street lobby and the K Street lobby, and those Zionists who surround our president, that they won't let him talk to me. He can talk to Hamas all he wants to. He can talk to anybody, but he's not going to let him talk. You got to, well, that kind of joking about it and keeping humor, because with my family members, because the media never understood or even cared about what they were doing to my family. And trying to keep my family smiling and laughing to keep from crying became my goal in terms of don't let them get wiped out by this. Our baby daughter, they ruined her senior prom, the night of her prom. Fox News was across the street filming her coming out of the house in her dress. When I moved her into Howard University's dormitory, they were on the sidewalk filming me taking her suitcases into the sidewalk. Now, you don't care, I say you, the media doesn't care what they're doing to kids. No, they don't. As long as they can accomplish their goal or try to accomplish their goal. That's, if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing. Well, go back to that wisdom that your parents gave you, and that people like my grandpa Jim, the third grade dropout tobacco farmer, says it's not what name folk call you, it's what name you answer to. They're gonna call you all kinds of names, but you know who you are. When you know who you are, it doesn't matter what other people think in terms of who they think you are, because you know who you are.
In my travels, one of the things that really comes to mind seriously is we went to a trip. We went away on a trip, and that particular trip we really didn't want to go because everybody was tired, and we had just put out a new CD and we was in very high demand. Excuse me. And it seemed like every weekend we were traveling, every weekend we were going. And we went to this one trip and we were dragging in the concert and we was like, So I was like, come on y'all, we gotta do this. And we got out there, the crowd was there. So the crowd kind of gave us the energy. But the whole while we was like, let's hurry up and do this and get back on the bus and get back home. We did the concert, and God bless the concert. Right after the concert, there was a woman who came to me, gave me a letter. And you know, at the concerts, you know, people always come put something in your hand. But I'm one of the ones, I don't throw anything away. You know, I keep everything, and I may not read it today, but I'll read it, I'll get to it. People give me CDs, I don't throw no CDs away. You know, I keep it. I may not listen to it for about a month, but I'm gonna get to it. So this one lady gave me this letter, and we finished the concert. I put it in my coat, got on the bus, and we were on our way back home to New York City. The next day, and I still kept the letter in my coat. The next day, I thought about the concert, and I thought about the lady giving me the letter. I decided to go get the letter. I read the letter, and actually till this day, I still got that letter. The letter read, you know, I'm glad I came to the concert. Tonight was gonna be my last time coming to church. I had made up in my mind that I didn't wanna live anymore. And she said that she had wrote a suicidal letter to her parents, and she was asking her parents to forgive her, but she didn't wanna live anymore. She told her mom in the letter to make sure she take care of her 2 little children, but this was it for her. And because of that concert and the songs that we sang and the ministry that night helped her to see that whatever she was going through, she have to get over it, or she could get over it. And she said that night she decided to live. And that just really blew me away. And I actually called her. I wrote her since then. I haven't been in contact with her for the last maybe 8 years, but that was the turning point in my life. Because again, none of us wanted to go to that concert. I didn't even want to do it. We was almost on the verge of canceling that particular concert. And I always think to myself, what if I would have canceled that concert? You know, and that young lady, you know, would have committed suicide. But it was that concert that gave her the strength to live. That is one thing that I will never, ever forget.
April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. We became incensed and wanted to destroy everything around us. I remember going over to a certain location near the campus, filling up some bottles with kerosene, sticking in the rag Molotov cocktails. And I remember running around to various places in West End, near the college, and throwing those Molotov cocktails and watching the fire start. A friend of mine and I, two of them actually, three of us, were on our way again to do some more burning. We had the Molotov cocktails. I remember I had one kind of stuck in my pocket in the back and one in the side pocket and one in my hand. They had theirs. And we were going across this big open field. I think the Morehouse School of Medicine is there now, something like that. And we heard this whirring sound. I said, what's that? The moon was out. We looked up. It was like a half-track truck. You know, one of those armored trucks, said Atlanta Police. There was a guy sitting on the top of it. He had a shotgun. It was a long one. And the light from the moon beamed off the shotgun. You could see it. And it started coming toward us. Now, I saw that truck. I saw that shotgun. I saw a mean-looking white man sitting up there. And I looked at my Molotov cocktail. I looked at that truck. I looked at that shotgun. I looked at that bottle. I looked at the truck. I looked at the shotgun. And I said, you know, I think Martin Luther King Jr. was right. Nonviolence is the only way. And man, I remember dropping the one I had in my hand, snatching out the ones I had in my pocket and throwing them on the ground and running like the wind. Now, what is remarkable about this, my friends got the same message. We were flying across this field. I mean, Bob Hayes couldn't have beat me running. And what's the brother's name today? I can't think, the 100-meter champion. But couldn't have beat me running. But what stopped me was a clothesline. Whoa! Bam! Brother, when I tell you that even with the snap back on that clothesline and knocking me flat on my back on that ground, I popped right back up and kept flying. Now the interesting thing was when I got to the location where we had started, my friends were there already with their legs crossed. They weren't even breathing. But that was a remarkable turnaround for me. I said, you know, we can't win this thing with bottles filled with gasoline. This man got truck and shotguns. And then down on that Peachtree Street, this guy literally could have blown my brains out. And I'm running trying to pick up some drugs. No. And so in many ways, I regret not having spent the time that I could have in my studies, more time. But in other ways, I learned some valuable lessons. And so today I understand more about the Christian values. I understand more about the philosophy of nonviolence. You know, I understand more about the necessity to be reconciled with others than to always be in opposition. And I try to teach that. But like I said, I'm a sinner saved by grace, so I don't always succeed.
Probably the most hard-hitting adverse situation or turbulent that came against me was my wife having contracted cancer. I love my wife very much. We've been married 57 years. So when this thing came upon her, it was devastating initially because neither she or I understood why it happened to her. Because knowing her and who she is and her life, it was inconceivable that this situation could come upon her. But what we learned from it was the fact that we had emphasized, which is not wrong, it just wasn't complete. We had emphasized the spiritual aspect of our lives, but hadn't really taken into consideration the physical aspect. In other words, the thing came upon her because she brought it on herself without knowing it by virtue of the way she was eating and taking care of her body, which she wasn't taking care of her body. But we didn't realize she wasn't taking care of her body because she and myself, we ate the foods we've always eaten. We were raised on those things. We always ate them, had no idea of their overall negative impact over time. And so as a result of that, we realized somebody gave us a book and some information, and it opened our eyes to why this could have come upon her. God didn't put it on her. But again, like I said, you can go eat arsenic if you want to. God will let you. That's not his choice. It's yours, but it could kill you. And so we found out from this experience that it was important to emphasize not just the spiritual aspect of life, but also the physical. Because the spirit, as I said before, we are created in the image of God. We are spirits. We have souls. We live inside of a body. So our bodies are our earth suits. So in order for my spirit to be able to motivate through life and exist and fulfill what life is all about, the body has to be functional. So if the body's impaired, the spirit's impaired. Are you following me? In other words, if my body is incapacitated, then the real me that's on the inside is going to be incapacitated. Okay, so that was probably the most devastating thing that happened in our life, or in my life, because I didn't understand why. I knew my wife's spirituality, I knew her morality. There's just no way in the world this thing could come upon her like that. But we never thought about the eating thing. I mean, she ate no live food ever, no salads ever. All the food that she ate was cooked food, which is dead food. If you don't balance it with some live food, vegetables and fruits and things like that, then it can take its toll. But even like the Bible says, we are wonderfully and fearfully made, meaning that this body is so constructed that you can abuse it over 40 years before it starts showing signs of abuse. It's so incredibly made. You can kick it in the butt, excuse my French, if you want to, but over time it's going to show up. So through that, we came to understand we got to also apply principles that deal with our physical lives as well as the spiritual aspect. Put the two together, you got a winning combination. That was about the most horrendous, devastating, frightening situation in the natural that came upon us. But that's a long time ago now, so we overcame.
What kind of cancer?
Lymphoma. And she had a lymphoma in a part of her body that could not be operated on. Couldn't get to it. It was all tied up with ligaments and veins and all that, but she kicked it because she knew her spiritual side of life was number one. So we took the principles that we knew in the Word of God and fought the thing, killed it, and got rid of it. And then, of course, closed that door by changing her lifestyle in terms of how she ate. Her beverage was she never drank water, ever, never any water. She drank 9 cups of coffee a day. That was her beverage. Well, that can create toxic waste. And if you don't have some way to get rid of the toxic waste, it's going to find out a way to get out of your body through a tumor or whatever. So we changed all of that.
My pastor is Dr. L. Patterson,
in Houston, Texas. He said this to me, well, he said it to a group of people, but I was there, and it felt like he was talking directly to me. He held his Bible up and he said, this is one thing that you can take throughout your ministry and throughout your life. Proper content produces proper character. Proper character produces proper conduct. No content, don't expect the character to change. And if the character doesn't change, don't expect the conduct to change. Revolutionized my whole life, let alone ministry. And that has been so true for me to this day. If I get the proper content, which is the Word of God, and then I appropriate it to my character, it'll change my conduct. That was one thing. The other thing that I think that was very important to me is the affirmation of my father that he had on me. Excuse me. Wow. You would think that it happened yesterday. This happened so many years ago. I mean, Dad's been dead for how many years now? I don't know, about 20 years now. He was dying of cancer, and I had taken him to get his chemotherapy. And I brought him back to my house. He lived between my house and my sister's house. And he was in the bed, kind of tired him out. And I was just looking at him, and I went over to him. I kissed him on his head, and I said to my father, I said, Dad, I want you to understand something, man. That I understand that the breakup or the split up between you and my mother, it wasn't all your fault. And he looked at me, and he proceeded to defend my mother. He said, no, your mother's a good mother. She's a good woman. She's a good mother. She took care of you. And he went and ran it on for about 5 minutes. And then when he stopped, I said, I didn't say she wasn't a good mother. She was an excellent mother to us. But just because she's a good mother doesn't mean she was a good wife to you. I said, she may have tried to be, but there was issues in her life that I understand now, and being a man and being a pastor and understanding the whole counseling dynamics. I said there were some things Mom could have done that she didn't do. And you didn't know how to help her to do it. She didn't know how to do some things for you, to help you to be all that you needed to be. And I just want to let you know that it's not all your fault. And I understand that. Tears started to stream down his face. And he looked at me and he said, no one in life has ever considered me or my viewpoint about your mother and I. I always took all the fault. I always took all the blame. And he said, you're the first man that has ever done that to me, ever said that to me, ever even helped me to even understand it. He said to me, son, you are not only a good preacher and pastor, but you are a man. And that day, I never knew that I needed the affirmation of another man to say that I was a man. And I think that for black boys and black young men, I think one of our problems is that we're always trying to identify, or our identity is an issue. We have an identity crisis of who we are. And that's why as black men, I think we're always enraged about fighting for our manhood, or you cross me and you offending my manhood now. And I think we fight for it because we've never been affirmed that we are that. It's almost like the rites of passage. We don't have that in our culture that we used to have, I'm told. Women know when they become women when they have a cycle. And other women will affirm them and say, now you're going into womanhood. But what do we go through that somebody says to us, or what experience that we have biologically that says to us that we're a man? We don't. It's just, I guess, the whole issue about us being able to make babies, I guess that is supposed to be the turning point for us when we find out that we can make babies and we have semen and all that kind of thing. I think that that's a sad thing to say that now we're a man. No, we're a boy. We're still a boy, but we can do manly things, but we're a boy. I think it comes a time where in every culture, and particularly our culture, the Jews have bar mitzvahs. What do African Americans have? What do black boys have to validate their manhood?
I guess immediately after I got elected to Congress, the feds did come with an investigation. And the truth of the matter is the investigation was in large measure pushed by the local political establishment because I'd never been in a political office and I got elected. I was not expected to beat the Democratic Party here in Queens County and or the person that they had up as the candidate. And the election was so overwhelming. I think at that point they made a determination that they were going to participate along with some members of this congregation who in my first 6 years or so had difficulty with transformation. And I didn't know until we saw the records after the trial that they had been a part of the process, or really saw it when they came as witnesses. But the reality is that if you're going to be a transformational leader, you got to be ready to take the kind of arrows you're going to get. And the biggest lesson I learned is that you got to be careful on your trust relationships, and you have to be careful even as you are trying to help other people, because there is an element that has a difficult time with trying to figure out how a 31-year-old guy comes into town and all of a sudden he's building all these homes and he's building a school and he's building. So until I ran for Congress, it was kind of under the radar. But when I won the seat, it was now out in the open. And I think people wanted to know how he did it. And if he did it, there's always this sense, I tend to think, on the part of the news media especially, that a black man, 30-some years old, could not have done this without probably stealing something or taking some of the money. And I think the shock that they got was when they found out in court that we had not taken any money. All the money was in the projects. Every building that we said we would build, we had built. And obviously the judge dismissed the case because he kept telling the prosecution that they had to come up with a case or he was going to dismiss it. And there was no case in the very first place. So, it's the price you pay. And anybody who thinks that there is not a price you pay for taking the risk, for being successful in doing something you believe in, is in for a great hit, because the reality is it's going to happen. You can't get away from it.
We have 3 children. We have one that didn't make it. Pregnant, in ministry. I wasn't pastoring at the time, working, and one day my water broke. I was 6 months into the pregnancy, and called the doctor. Doctor says go straight to the hospital. Talks to my husband, talks to my mother, my parents, and go to the hospital, go into labor. But all of a sudden you can tell when things are not right. You can tell, not just within you, but within the hospital environment. The nurses are not as attentive. The doctors are not there. You know, it's not that they're not there, you know, but there's, you know, just not the hovering and crowd. And, you know, you open your eyes and you're in this room by yourself. You go like, okay, where's everybody? The doctor tells you that you're going to deliver, but we're not quite sure if the child is going to live. I didn't know at the time that the doctor had told my husband, you know, just going to have to help her through this and hope for the next child. My mother in the ministry came to the hospital, and all I could hear was her praying in my ear, praying through it. The baby was born, was a little girl. We named her Faith and Hope. She only lived a few hours, was baptized and consecrated to the Lord and died. And then afterwards, a nurse came to me and said, would you like to hold your baby? Because my mother and my husband said, no, don't let her see the baby. She's the baby. She'll never be able to get beyond that. And she said, let me ask her the question. And I said yes, and she put the baby, tiny, tiny little baby in my arms. And for the next few hours, having conversation, being in tuned. And then I found out that nurse, this is her ministry. She had lost babies. And her ministry as a nurse was to help new mothers get beyond the death of their child. Getting back to my room, she brought the baby back to me again, one more time. And we cried together, prayed together. And so later on, preacher friends of mine said, oh, we didn't have to worry about you. You're saved. You and God are tight. And I said, you should have worried. You should have worried. Because I kept, why? You know, those why questions. Why now? Why me? Why here? What was my salvation? My salvation was in the middle of the night, it clear as a bell, hearing a voice says, read the book of Job. So I got my Bible out and I started at the first chapter and began reading through the book of Job and following my experience and Job's experience. I mean, it was absolutely a loss for me. Absolutely a loss for me. It was a testing of my faith. Is that, did I really believe what I was preaching? Did I believe what God was saying to me? And then getting to the end of the chapter of Job, and that Job was blessed more at the end than he was at the beginning. Less than a year later, a member of my congregation, same situation, 6 months into the pregnancy, water breaks on the job, rush to the hospital, husband calls, Pastor, you gotta come. I'm going in the mindset that this is not gonna make it. The baby's gone. And I go to and I'm now preparing them, you know, for what I thought was gonna be the death of the child. The baby didn't die, the baby lived. A few months later, we're in worship, and I recall it clearly that my arms are up for the benediction because, you know, they came late to the service. My arms up for the benediction, and in they walk, husband and wife, and baby in the arms. And in that moment, I said, God, why did my baby die and her baby lived? And God says, because you could handle it, and you wouldn't be able to help her or any other mother in a similar situation without the experience. It was a testing of my faith. But praise God, we got through it.
Was that answer sufficient for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the time. Do I still have moments when I go back? You know, I get filled now. You know, do I have moments I get filled? Yeah, I do. Would I want the child to live? Yes, absolutely. But it wasn't to be. and I accept that answer.
I was always socially conscious and socially active. So when the riots took place in my high school in the 60s to bring African American studies into a predominantly white high school that I was bused to as part of the desegregation program, I enjoyed every bit of it. We got it done. People got their heads busted in the process, but we got it done. So I always wanted a cause. And I'll never forget how I felt taking that D train from Brooklyn all the way up to Harlem to visit my aunt in the early 60s. This was when Malcolm was still alive. And you'd see these brothers in their bow ties and be out on Lenox Avenue sharing their message. It left an imprint. I continued to listen. And finally, I decided to make a commitment. I didn't go as far as getting my ex, but I did commit, attend the mosque, adhere. And what it provided was order, strength, identification, a sense of being. What it did not provide was an answer to who is God, what is reality, what is truth. So that was left open. And finally, as a banker, I ended up having a secretary come to work for me in 1974, and a little Pentecostal woman, and she was very sincere about her belief in Jesus. And I asked her questions, and finally her pastor told her to stop talking to me because I'd confuse her. But what troubled me was her childlike faith and deep, profound trust in this Jesus that she could not see. And how profound the reality that she lived in this relationship with. So it really sparked my curiosity. I knew I didn't have that. She invited me to a meeting with a guy named Nicky Cruz, who was a former gang member, leader of the Mau Mau's gang here in New York, and he was sharing his testimony. And when he shared it, it was deep. It was coming from his heart. It was real. It was something new to me, something different to me that I'd never experienced. I remember two things, these words. Number one, I'm the God you're looking for. And I can't explain it any more than intuitively. I knew it was Christ. But not the Christ that had been presented to me, but Christ in the deep essence and sense of truth and reality coming together and culminating in one person, tangible to me. The second statement was, I and my word are one. That was important because it took me away from these images of a white Jesus, Chinese Jesus, an Asian Jesus, because no matter what culture you went, if there was a portrait of him, he had the features of that culture. But it took me from an image of a person to words, the power of words, and the power of that book, Scripture. And all of a sudden, I began to read it with new eyes. A new journey began. Change is the only constant in life. Change is the essence of maturation. You'll never mature unless you're willing to change. Change begins with a decision. People don't change because they haven't decided to change. They don't decide to change because they haven't been convicted that the way they're thinking or the way they're living needs to change. So they'll continue in it. I was convicted. I made a decision. Decision translates into energy. So when you make a decision that it's a heart decision, your spirit rises up to the occasion and energizes you with the courage to see it through. For me, I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, there was no doubt. I found the truth. And when you find the truth, so many things begin to fall into place so quickly. So many questions get answered so fast. Not all of them, but the core question that you know, this is it.
My wife really, for 5 years, when I turned 50, she told me, you got to go in for a colonoscopy. I was too busy. I said, Dee, look, now you got to stop worrying about this. I'm fine. I'm doing good. And she kept every year, and so she would just do it like once a year. And, oh, you're just too stubborn. You're just too stubborn. Well, at 55, and this was after Hurricane Katrina, I decided to go in. Of course, I had more free time now. Wasn't doing 7 services, so I had time to go in. I was feeling good. I said, all right. I called her my nagging angel because, I mean, she nagged me. I said, all right, I'm going in. But I thank God that she nagged me to go in, because when I went in feeling good, came out, the doctor said, sorry, Bishop, and he was a surgeon from our church. I'm sorry, Bishop, we found cancer. And I think it hurt him more than me, because he was crying, because he loved me so. But he said, you know, we're going to claim this in the name of Jesus. But I spoke to him and said, look, I know I'm healed. It's no problem, because, again, I was standing on the promise that I got on my knees in New Jersey when God said he was going to make my latter greater than my former. Again, the promise. So my faith was not wavering at all in this situation, because I knew God was going to heal me. Lord, I don't know why you let me go through losing the church and losing a home and losing the cars. I don't know why I got cancer, but I know it's for a reason. I began to shout, Lord, you must say, hey, is this another book? What you going to do? I mean, you up to something major. So there was no wavering in my faith as it related to what God was going to do. And that's what the surgeon told me. He said, as it related to your colon, the cancer was right at the wall. If you would have waited just even maybe another week, another month, that cancer could have gone through the wall, and cancer could have spread all through your body. But you see, God spared me, and he let my wife keep talking to me. In fact, I'd never seen her be so aggressive. I mean, she just stopped my schedule at that particular time. And, you know, my wife, she's always respected me highly. She said, look, I already called your executive assistant. I blocked off time, and you going in. I said, Dee, you know, I got to do this. Look, it's already done, and the appointment is already set. That was God speaking through her. That's how God works. I mean, I was looking at her and said, have you lost your mind? I mean, what are you talking about? But it was already set. I had to go in at that time, or cancer would have spread all through my body. So that's why I knew God was covering me. That's why I know that I'm here for a purpose. That's why I know I'm here for a reason. And so I began to just say, he was wounded for my transgression, and with his stripes I am healed. I went to my church and said, don't worry about it. It's all right. I'm healed in the name of Jesus. So I'm a living witness. That was in 2006, and I'm still here, praising God.
No more signs?
Cancer-free, no chemo, no nothing. Just totally cancer-free. In fact, I went just to get a checkup. Doctor says, I am so amazed at your age, 60 years old, that you take no medicine at all. I don't take any medicine, no blood pressure, no nothing. God has just been taking care of me. He said, do you realize how many 60-year-old people come in here and they got 5 or 6 different medicines? God's been keeping me. Don't get me to shout right now on the scroll. I will.
I was born in North Little Rock, Arkansas, 1940. My father's a pastor, and so I was born in the church and spent time in the church throughout my childhood. But in Arkansas, those were the days prior to integration, prior to the civil rights movement. And I remember one special thing in North Little Rock. In 1945, the World War II came to an end. The Allies emerged victorious. My father got the family in the car, as did all the families in town, and we all were driving up and down the street, waving American flags and celebrating the victory of the Allies over the Nazis and the Japanese. And my brother or I were waving our flag out the window of the car, and a white family came along beside us. And their son reached out and snatched my flag away. And we protested to my father, Dad, that boy took my flag, get it back. And my father told us to be quiet, and he did not protest, because black men did not protest what white people did in the South during those days if they valued their life. And at 5 years old, I had the experience of understanding that my flag could be snatched away, and my rights as an American citizen could be taken away from me, and there was literally nothing that I could really do about it. It made a great impact on my mind and on my early life. And fast forward several years, 1962, I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and attended grad school in Atlanta. In between that time, I'd tried to do things to hold on to my dignity as a black young man, as a black person. I tried to find myself. I'd put African pictures on the wall and all of that. But that the impression, the impact of that 5-year-old experience literally stayed with me until in Atlanta, the civil rights movement was at its apex, and Martin Luther King was coming to campus and speaking, and I became student body president of my grad school, seminary, the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta. And we chartered buses and went down into Selma and into Montgomery, where the demonstrations were taking place during that time. It was as if Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement were literally handing my flag back to me. And I had to fight for it. I had to fight for freedom. One demonstration, we were on our way to City Hall, and because I was student body president, the demonstration leader allowed me to march beside him. And we came to a certain intersection, and Jim Clark, the sheriff, and his troops and dogs met us and demanded that we go back to the church rather than trying to march to City Hall. The demonstration leader said, no, we're going to march for our freedom. And at that point in time, all of us in the demonstration were really willing to die if necessary, or at least to be attacked by the dogs, or to be beaten for our freedom. And freedom just meant that much to us, and we were so caught up in the effort, in the endeavor, that we were willing to march. And fortunately, Jim Clark and his dogs and his troops turned away from us quickly and rushed away, and we didn't know where they were going, but we found out that we were just a decoy demonstration, and the real demonstration had almost made it to the church. And I said to some individuals, I went on back to the church and changed my diaper and went on about my business. But that was a memorable moment for me as a young 5-year-old, and then later on as a young man, to be able to be involved in a movement that would hand back flags of millions of black people that had been snatched away from them.
I hit rock bottom or close to rock bottom many, many, many times. You know, you're looking at someone who, my goodness, man, I've been in and out of jail so many times. I've been isolated from my family so many times. You know, I can't tell you the feeling of what it's like to go through being a young man, fighting addiction for literally years. I was strung out for 15 years. I was addicted to cocaine for 15 years. All of my youth, you know, the enemy just robbed me of my youth. And then getting into my adult life, having young, small children, and not being able to be there with them because I was driven by this addiction. I mean, I remember leaving the house and tears running down my face, and I'll get broke up talking about it. I remember my baby girl, Elizabeth, you know, she was just above knee high. She would literally cling to my leg and try to keep me from going out to get in the vehicle because she was so accustomed to me getting in the car and never returning, sometimes for a month, 2 months. Nobody knew where I was. I'd stay strung out for weeks. I was not that person who could go out and have a social drink or have a social high. Man, when I got high, I'd stay gone for months at a time. So, you know, broken, man. I remember driving to the liquor store, to the dope house, crying, God, take this addiction from me. I don't want to break my family like I'm doing. I'm tired of living like this. And literally just cry like a baby all the way to the dope house. So those moments were, I was broken then, but really the thing that turned my life around, really brought me to my lowest of low was about 7 years ago. Well, it's going on 7 years ago. I was in a vehicle, I was driving a vehicle. We had been drinking with 2 friends of mine. We were actually on our way to a drug deal. And running around 90 miles an hour, flipped a car and ran into a brick wall. And I think, you know, sometimes that brick wall is symbolic of what we do sometimes spiritually. We just butt with our own head and butt with our own head, and finally, you know, it's like the scripture says, it's hard to kick against the pricks. And you know, after a while, man, it just gets old. It gets real old. And hit that wall. 2 of my friends were life flighted. We literally thought that they would not make it, and they took me to prison, to jail. I remember sitting in that jail cell saying, God, I've had many people say, what was the turning point? Was it jail? And you know, it wasn't jail, because I'd been in jail for years. I'd been in jail, in and out of jail so many times. One more time going to jail, what was that? I said, God, I don't even want to get out of jail if you cannot give me some type of strategy. I don't want to get out of here, because I didn't trust myself, and I knew when I got out I would go straight back to the dope house. And God spoke something to me. He said, you come into 100% accountability, and you'll never do another drug in your life. And you know, because for all my life I had just ran. I was running from everything. I was running from church, what I thought church was, what I thought God was, what I thought a relationship with Christ was. I was running from all that. And so because I was running and trying to get away from it, I cast off all restraints. Nobody could hold on to me. Nobody could control me. I was crazy, just rebellious, kicking against the pricks. And so when God spoke that to me, man, I just said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And for a year and a half, when I got out of jail, come into 100% accountability to my mother and father. And for a year and a half, man, I did not go anywhere by myself. Nobody seen me by myself. We've got a long driveway at the house. I moved in with my mother and father, and I wouldn't even walk to the mailbox by myself. Drug dealers drive by the house real slow, trying to catch me outside, trying to catch me because I was so valuable to them as a drug trafficker and a drug abuser. I was valuable to them, so they would try to get me to to come back. And I've watched them, and many times I've watched them drive out of the house looking for me out in the yard. And I believe with all of my heart that God allows us to go through situations in our life. I'm going to tell you, man, I get broke up thinking about it, because I know that everything I've done in my life has just been things to position me to truly be highly effective in people's lives. When I sit here and tell people you can make it, I'm not telling you something that I read in a book. I'm telling you something I lived. I'm living this thing. It's my conviction. It is my creed. It's my dogma. It is who I am. Everything I've been through makes up Wes Morgan. And that's why I can sit here and be so effective in people's lives, because I'm not telling you something I read. I'm telling you something that I'm living. This is my life.
But I knew in my childhood people who had been through slavery. And I had a friend, Mr. Ike Johnson, who had been a slave. And he said he would tell how the older people, one of the women would go out to be with the children old enough to go to the fields. But those young enough would stay back. And at dinner time, at lunchtime, they would pour the mash, whatever the milk stuff, into a trough. And these little children, all the dirt on their hands, would come and scoop up the milk and mash it as well as they could. It was an awful thing. Think of how much that deprived people of any sense of being human. And yet, somehow or other, the people who went through that salvaged, I don't know how, their humanity. Salvaged it. And came out of all that human beings with problems, flaws, shortcomings, my God, yes, but came out as human beings. Yeah.
Everybody got a testimony. I'm pretty sure we all know how the story ends. John 14:6 explained it to us. So the word said it. So that settles it. Be encouraged, people of God. God is the way, He's the truth, He's the life. You know what I'm saying? I still can't see how I made it to 621. Life just wasn't fair, looking through it from the barrels of a gun. Little girls losing hope, y'all. Prostituting at age 14. Teenage boys on the corners looking worse. Jeans sagging down to the knees. Neighborhoods full of crime. Unemployment's at an all-time high. Every time I turn on the news, I wonder why another brother had to die. So now I'll take a stand to do what I can for these streets. We got a hunger for the presence of God to save the souls of our fellow. Can't quit, can't deny, can't fold. You gotta try, there's no way, there's no lie. He's the truth, He's the light. So we can't quit, can't deny, can't fold. You gotta try, there's no way, there's no lie. He's the truth and the light. Come on, Dad, so drunk and rule the hood as we fall on our...
Sometimes your soul craves for something that your mind has not been taught to want.
There were some times that I cried all night long.
That was real. It happened. I'm telling you what happened. All he's been around was vision and dreams.
Actually, I was really looking for sympathy.
I've gone through times of discouragement.
I have had people literally take their clothes off.
But I broke the rules. I broke the rules and went lower than I was supposed to go.
Our culture rewards fame
however you get it. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy.
And when he made that announcement,
I saw the negative side of my people.
And so he makes it a still shot instead of a moving picture.
And he said, now nigga, what you gonna do?
Grade F, and put an F in red letters. An F is an F in black ink. I don't know why the man had to put it in red ink, but F in red ink.
When God has his hand upon a person and he regulates that person's life, when your time comes, there's nothing in the world that can stop that time.
When I think of the scroll, I think of...
When I hear the term the scroll,
I think about Jesus.
It just throws me in the book of Revelations.
The old ancient Hebrew texts that were rolled up in a scroll.
the unwinding of the scroll is to read the story.
The Bible originally was written in scrolls, and a lot of the ancient documents, other things were written in scroll form.
Well, when I go to scroll, immediately I go to the biblical unwrapping and unraveling of the Word of God.
To view the scroll is the distinctive between reading Old Testament scripture and New Testament.
A recording of experiences.
People went to scrolls then to get wisdom, to get knowledge, to learn the story.
It brings up images of sacred text in their original form.
Every time I hear the word scroll, it reminds me of Jerusalem.
It says to me something that is written with pen and parchment.
The scroll was where the scribes transcribed the word of God. Scrolls represent the truth.
Scrolls speak of ancient, wonderful writings of encouragement.
Something that when I finally read it, I go through a whole gamut of emotion.
Something that I can see that provides me navigation.
I think of something to be read.
The first thing that comes to my mind is the Ten Commandments, the laws.
When I visit Jewish synagogues, the Torah is usually on scrolls. And the law, that's teaching, instruction.
And they're very sacred, such that when they get old and tattered and non-usable, they bury them. They have a funeral service for them. They just don't throw them in the trash somewhere.
It's a rolled up book, and it speaks to me of something of antiquity.
A legacy or a historical preservation of realities that are put down for posterity to read.
The scroll gives you an opportunity to look beyond the lips of the prophet into the heart and the fears and the feet of the prophet.
We have the scroll as it relates to the Bible. What about our 21st century prophets?
I think you're trying to lend a hand to people to give them an understanding of what real life is about, what really walking with the Lord is about. How do you deal with real challenges? Question, how do you deal with things of regret? How do you get motivated to capture the moment that you're in, to live in the now and not in the past, and anticipate a glorious future when things don't change the way you think they should change?
The scroll is very appropriate because it connotes revelation. It also connotes the kind of writing that lasts sometimes millenniums.
It's not about knowing what the book says, it's about making it live. And what I've tried to do is be a living scroll. Others have perfected orating the scroll. I've tried to do the scroll in action.
You're preserving a piece and a slice of our history as Africans in the North American diaspora that probably nobody else is doing.
It is a rolling back, a rolling out of one's life so that it might be revealed to those who are going to read it.
When I was, a kid growing up in my community, somewhat sheltered, not exposed to a lot of diversity, as far as my little world is concerned. Of course, being in this area, it's always been an area that's multi-ethnic, multicultural. yet and still, kind of found myself with just a certain segment or certain group. And when I started just coming to see myself in relationship to others, I always felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb because I looked so different. I remember asking my mother whether I was white or black, because in school, then there was the name calling, and it wasn't always who are you. When people questioned my identity, it was what are you? And so I kind of felt like I wasn't black enough to fit in totally with the black students, and wasn't white enough to fit in totally with the white students. So I almost kind of felt like an outcast. I experienced my share of being picked on and threats, and for no apparent reason, just that you look different and I don't like you. And there was one guy that I don't know, we just did not hit it off, and for no apparent reason, again, he just didn't like me, and well, I wasn't a fan of his because he didn't like me, so oh well. And I remember over the years of elementary school to junior high, up to our ninth grade trip to DC, things had escalated and it became like a volcano and it exploded. And he got upset with me because there was this girl he was liking and she took sick on the trip, and she was like a sister to me, so I was just kind of trying to help her out and all. And oh my God, he just got real jealous, and he started like just really taunting me and all. And I remember we're walking home from school one day, and it wasn't the day and I wasn't the one to be messed with, but it was a defining point, because he said something, and the next thing I know, and I'm certainly not advocating violence, but the next thing I know, man, books were dropped, and I think he swung at me, I swung at him. When it was all said and done, there was blood on my shirt, and to the glory of God, it was his blood and not mine. And it wasn't a long fight, but that particular moment really ended the nonsense, and we became very good friends afterwards. I mean, we would hang together. In fact, growing up in the church, when it came time for us to go to our senior proms, he didn't have a car, so he came with us, and we just became very good friends. And I often think about him. He passed away a couple of years ago in an accident, a drowning victim. And I often think about that moment, because here we had wasted so much time being at odds with each other and didn't even have a reason other than our differences. And when it ended in that fight, after that, I mean, he was like, yeah, he got me, because people, they hear about the fights, yeah, he got me. And then after that, it was like, I don't even know how we became friends, but we became very, very good friends. He even started going to the church that I grew up in, and we were friends until the day he died. I called his mom just a few months ago just to check on him, because it's been 4 years since he passed.
Well, we were married for 6 years, and we were on our way. We were working in Haiti. We worked in Haiti for 6 years as missionaries, and we were on our way to a conference in Washington, D.C. But we stopped in New Jersey because that's where our family was from. That's where family lived. And there's good medical care in Haiti, but she wasn't Haitian, she was from here. And so we always took advantage of being in transit to go to U.S. doctors. And so that's when we, right before the conference, we went to a doctor, and she found out that she had a lump. And she went and had it examined and did the biopsy and found out it was cancer. And so that was very hard. It was very hard. She was 34 years old. No, actually, she was 33. I was 30 years old. And it was a very, very aggressive cancer. And so you don't, you know, when you're 30 and you're a missionary and you're doing all these wonderful things, you don't expect that to happen to you. And so at first we were in denial, we didn't believe it. So we went for a second opinion. I mean, not to say that people shouldn't go for a second opinion. I think that's pretty normal. But it was just, I refer to that day as the day our lives really stopped. Because we had all these plans, we were going to do the conference and go back and do this and do that. But then at that moment, everything just stopped. Everything stopped. We're like, what are we going to do? What can we do? And, you know, the following months were just very hard. It was very hard. And I think she battled the cancer for a year. And then she died. It was just very hard. But I can't explain it. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think sometimes people go through very difficult experiences and they get to a point and they can say, aha, I see why that happened. I haven't gotten there yet. I don't see why it happened. I feel like I'm resolved that it happened. I'm remarried. You know, I've got a great life. My kids are awesome. My wife is awesome. But I can't say that I fully understand why it happened. Now, I can see a lot of good that came out from it, but I can't say it all makes sense. And to be honest with you, I'm not expecting for me to get that understanding. You know, I know that one day, you know, hopefully when I get to heaven, it all makes sense. But I'm not expecting that, you know, while I'm here on earth, one day God will just unfold everything before me so I can. It's too big. I think it's way too big. You know?
Growing up as a kid, I had a desire to go to college. I'm one of 11 children. Growing up in the South where my parents never made more than a nickel above minimum wage. And so just the thought of going to college for some, you know, would have been unthinkable. But I knew what I wanted to do, and I got my first non-agricultural job after my senior year in high school. And that was working as a concrete finisher, you know, working with a guy who was a specialist at it. He taught me the trade, making $50 a week. I paid the guy $50 a week, $5 a week that drove us to work every day. And they took out $5 a week, you know, in taxes and et cetera. So they left me with $40. And I would take 10% of that and give it to any needy family in my hometown. And my dad had said, you know, I don't know how you plan to go to college giving your money away. But I was of the belief that I could get by giving. So I shared. And when time to go to college, I left Cairo going to Atlanta, which was about 230 miles north of where I lived. Got a ride with my aunt. And she dropped me off on campus. And because I had sent all my stuff in, you know, they let me in the dormitory. And on registration day, I got in line, you know, and signed up for all of my classes. And the last place in line was where you were supposed to pay money. And when I got to that part of the line, I told them all I had was $15, but I want to go to school. And the lady gave me a note to go see the president. And I went in his office. When I got in there, there were hundreds of other students, I guess, with the same problem that I had, but were determined to go to school. And so I finally got in to talk to the president. I told him I want to go to college. I turned down basketball scholarships to go to other schools because I wanted to go to Morris Brown. I wanted to go to a private Christian college, and I don't have any money. But I was determined to go. And so he signed a piece of paper for me to, you know, to finish my registration. And they allowed me to enter school with no money. He got me a job working in the dining hall washing dishes. And I went to class every day and washed dishes, you know, at every meal, you know, on campus. determined to go to school. And when basketball season came around, I went out for the basketball team. Coach told me, you know, I made the team, but he didn't have any money. And but he was able to help me to get books, so that helped me with my books. And so the first year, you know, I had to get special permission to take final exams because I still owed money. And the second year, I went out for the team and made it again and earned a scholarship. And to make a long story short, I was able to go to college, I was able to finish college, and when I left college, I had a surplus in finances rather than a negative. My mom today, if you ask her how I went to college, she wouldn't be able to tell you. Because while I was there, I had a full-time job the whole time, went to school full-time, and I took a full load. And so after graduating and coming to New Jersey, I figured that there were other kids out there just like me. And so I figured somebody had to show them the love that was shown to me. So I created the Simmons Scholarship and Community Service Corporation. And we put forth an effort to raise money. And over the last 16 years, we raised over $350,000 to help underprivileged kids go to college.
My school history is probably very jaded, and I would never survive a vetting process by the White House because of the stains in my school record. My dad, who was a pastor, traveled around the country doing revivals and evangelical meetings, and it never failed. I never got in trouble in school while my father was in town. I only got in trouble if he was away on revival somewhere. And on one occasion, when I got suspended yet again for fighting, my mother came and picked me up from the school. And my mother's from New York, and straight hood. So wasn't no belt, wasn't no go get a twig. My mother was fight me with closed fists and would just hit me in the chest, say, "You think you're a man? Hit me back." But I knew that if I hit her back or even looked like it, it was going to be a Cassius Clay knockout. So I got in the car, I'm bracing myself because I know my mother is getting ready to swing, hit me in the chest, and she was just going to do some Atari body blows. I got in the car and my mother just broke down crying. And says, "I can't do anything else with you. I give up." She says, "I am no longer your mother." If you can imagine hearing this, you're in the 8th grade. I'm no longer your mother. I've done everything I know to do. I'm giving you back to God. And I pray that God will do everything short of killing you. But God needs to handle you now because there's nothing else me and your father can do. So we driving. I'm trying to figure out, is she dropping me off at a group home? Am I going to foster care? Is she giving up on me? But she didn't beat me. She didn't holler at me. So I got home. I'm waiting on the other shoe to drop, waiting for the other beat. And I finally go into the kitchen where my mother is, ready to turn myself in, saying, you ready to talk to me now? And she says, "No, I don't have anything else to say. Now it's just between you and God." That was a life-defining moment, to know that your own mother has walked away and says that everything that happens in your life is now between you and God. And that has carried with me like the Rock of Gibraltar, that at this point and at the phases of crisis in my life, before I called my parents, I now call God first, because I realized that they washed their hands of me a long time ago. So everything that I've been able to survive and escape and endure is because my parents literally have given me back over to God.
When I was in love with God, I loved the Lord, but I was also steeped in tradition because I was taught that these are the regiments. This is what you do. Nothing wrong with coaching. I love them. I love them to death. I love those men and women of God. but the way that we were moving, I knew that I wanted to do something different, that I was born to do something different, but I was caught up in the construct of I really couldn't do what I felt God told me to do. And early on, maybe a few years ago, I heard God say, maybe about 5-6 years ago, I heard God says, launch a ministry, start a ministry. Well, I kind of went out, sat down, and talked to someone, but I put it on the back burner, kind of left it alone. I had a friend of mine that actually, it was funny, was playing for the Cincinnati Bengals. He flew me up, came and watched the game, and had a challenging good time. Last night I was there, the very last night, I probably got one of the most disturbing calls. And I said to myself, God, what is going on? After the phone call, I picked the phone, called my wife. I said, maybe I don't understand. You know, I know I'm trying to do right. And then she said something to me. She said, sometimes people often perceive things differently. So, you know, in a natural conversation, someone said, you said something, but you're thinking, well, no, I didn't say it like that. So I was flying back in, and before the plane landed, I wound up dozing off. And I was getting ready. I had died. I was getting ready.
I read a book a couple of years ago by Kenneth Copeland. He was a student pilot for Oral Roberts. And Oral Roberts said to him, if your dreams don't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough. When I heard that statement, I began to weep. I began to weep, and I was just like, then I must really be onto something, because I'm terrified about everything that I have to do, because I ain't got money for it. I can't afford it. Nobody has ever done it. But I know that I'm called for greatness. I know that I'm called for greatness. And so I began to make that my motto. You know, when I was going to look for a house, I looked for houses for years. I looked for houses for years, and I bumped into this neighborhood that was being built, and I was like, this is an incredible neighborhood. I looked at that price, I was like, wrong neighborhood. I talked myself out of it, but the Lord kept waking me up, and I kept seeing myself in the living room of my home. And the Lord woke me up one morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, snow on the ground. I'm sitting on the back picnic table in the yard in my pajamas, crying out to God. I was like, God, why are you doing this to me? I can't afford this house. And he said to me, if your dreams don't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough. And I was like, I got it. And I began to step out in areas that I couldn't afford. And my mortgage hasn't been late. So I tell people, don't be don't be afraid or allow the spirit of intimidation to talk you out of your blessing or your assignment.
And the man took his finger, put his finger in my daddy's face, and he said, if you niggas don't leave here, we're gonna lock you up. Now get on away from here.
It was a conflict between myself and the nation. They declared war on me. I got bomb threats.
The media never understood or even cared about what they were doing to my family.
Sometimes when I laid on that rock and felt so all alone, I wondered, is there a God?
So you got to learn how to have a press conference, but then sit down and have a self-conference.
And then when my sister dropped, oh man, I got angry at God.
The scroll gives you an opportunity to look beyond the lips of the prophet into the heart and the fears and the feet of the prophet.
He said to me, son, you are not only a good preacher and pastor, but you are a man.
The doctor tells you that you're going to deliver, but we're not quite sure if the child is going to live.
Sometimes our greatest messages are never in our lips. It's in our struggle.
I think you're trying to lend a hand to people to give them an understanding of what real life is about, what really walking with the Lord is about.
You're preserving a slice of our history as Africans in the North American diaspora that probably nobody else is doing.
Everything I've been through makes up West Morgan. And that's why I can sit here and be so effective in people's lives, because I'm not telling you something I read. I'm telling you something that I'm living. This is my life.
I have gone to the morgues with mothers to identify the bodies of their children.
Everything in my environment and in my home life showed me what it is that I needed to do. I just wasn't in the right area at that time to really evolve and to mature.
Where there's no family affection, where there is no storge, there is complete imbalance in the human environment and the human experience.
Her mother and father both died of AIDS, and the family kept her locked up in a closet.
My own daughter had gotten pregnant and was not married, and she was a teenager. Was, for me, traumatic.
Jean, thus saith the Lord. The Lord said, your sickness is not unto death. Man, the house went up.
And I was convicted by the power of his message. And I knew that reconciliation was the Christian thing.
But now I'm 55 years old. How do you start all over at 55?
After I buried him, I walked in my church with tears rolling down my face, and I stood in the pulpit, and I usually sing a fast song called I'll Praise You. But this Sunday I walked in and I just started singing those words. I never would have made it.
I now don't believe that you should marry for love. And I teach that to my marriage ministry.
Just to spend time and to look at the man that taught me about life and watching him die, teaching me how to die, had innumerable moments that I'll never forget.
Television ministry was exploding. We were in demand all across the world, and I was building the largest facility I had ever built, $45 million facility. And my mother had a brain tumor that later developed into Alzheimer's, and she was going down while the building was going up, and I couldn't stop either one of them.
Six childhood friends pulled back into their past.
I need all of you here to help me with Billy's funeral.
Forced to face a childhood interrupted.
We had some good times in there, didn't we?
Whatever. Was everything all right during the service today?
It's got to be the devil.
How's it affecting your game?
You're a superstar. You see my hand shaking? What do you think?
Get off me! Get off me!
What kind of deal?
A rematch, for old time's sake.
I only did it to be close to you.
I'm sure glad you got those hormones under control. So tell me how you did it.
It was lust. It wasn't love.
Let me out.
What are you doing?
Descending Dove Productions presents a story about the last time.
I don't want to live like this anymore.
The last love.
Still love it, aren't you?
Madly.
The last memory.
Carl! He was hurting me, Aunt Janice.
The last chance.
Forgive yourself.
The only way to find peace within yourself is to make peace with your past. The Last Adam, coming soon.
Sometimes your soul craves for something that your mind has not been taught to want.
There were some times that I cried all night long.
That was real. It happened. I'm telling you what happened.
All he's been around was vision and dreams.
Actually, I was really looking for sympathy.
I've gone through times of discouragement.
I have had people literally take their clothes off.
But I broke the rules. I broke the rules and went lower than I was supposed to go.
Our culture rewards fame however you get it.
I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy.
And when he made that announcement,
I saw the negative side of my people.
And so he makes it a still shot instead of a moving picture.
And he said, now nigga, what you gonna do?
Grade F, and put an F in red letters. F is an F in black ink. I don't know why the man had to put it in red ink, but F in red ink.
When God has his hand upon a person and he regulates that person's life, when your time comes, there's nothing in the world that can stop that time.
I have gone to the morgues with mothers to identify the bodies of their children.
Everything in my environment and in my home life showed me what it is that I needed to do. I just wasn't in the right area at that time to really evolve and to mature.
Where there's no family affection, where there is no storge, there is complete imbalance in the human environment and the human experience.
Her mother and father both died of AIDS, and the family kept her locked up in a closet.
My own daughter had gotten pregnant and was not married, and she was a teenager. Was, for me, traumatic.
Jean, thus saith the Lord. The Lord said, your sickness is not unto death. Man, the house went up.
And I was convicted by the power of his message. And I knew that reconciliation was the Christian thing.
But now I'm 55 years old. How do you start all over at 55?
After I buried him, I walked in my church with tears rolling down my face, and I stood in the pulpit. And I usually sing a fast song called I'll Praise You. But this Sunday I walked in and I just started singing those words. I never would have made it.
I now don't believe that you should marry for love. And I teach that to my marriage ministry.
Just to spend time and to look at the man that taught me about life and watching him die, teaching me how to die. I had innumerable moments that I'll never forget.
Television ministry was exploding. We were in demand all across the world, and I was building the largest facility I had ever built, $45 million facility. And my mother had a brain tumor that later developed into Alzheimer's, and she was going down while the building was going up, and I couldn't stop either one of them.
I have gone to the morgues with mothers to identify the bodies of their children.
Everything in my environment and in my home life showed me what it is that I needed to do. I just wasn't in the right area at that time to really evolve and to mature.
Where there's no family affection, where there is no storge, there is complete imbalance in the human environment and the human experience.
Her mother and father both died of AIDS, and the family kept her locked up in a closet.
My own daughter had gotten pregnant and was not married, and she was a teenager. Was, for me, traumatic.
Jean, thus saith the Lord. The Lord said, your sickness is not unto death. Man, the house went up.
And I was convicted by the power of his message. And I knew that reconciliation was the Christian thing.
But now I'm 55 years old. How do you start all over at 55?
After I buried him, I walked in my church with tears rolling down my face, and I stood in the pulpit. And I usually sing a fast song called I'll Praise You. But this Sunday I walked in and I just started singing those words. I never would have made it.
I now don't believe that you should marry for love. And I teach that to my marriage ministry.
Just to spend time and to look at the man that taught me about life and watching him die, teaching me how to die. I had innumerable moments that I'll never forget.
television ministry was exploding. We were in demand all across the world, and I was building the largest facility I had ever built, $45 million facility. And my mother had a brain tumor that later developed into Alzheimer's, and she was going down while the building was going up, and I couldn't stop either one of them.